where am I even supposed to start? I was 17 once, so I guess let's begin with iOS. Rumors had suggested for several months now that iOS 17 was going to be a nothing burger of an update. And while none of the features announced were earth-shattering, I think the rumors were wrong, and we got more quality of life improvements than any iOS update in years. Sometimes we forget, but the iPhone, it is a phone. And we may forget that because iOS 17 brings our first updates to the phone app in well over a decade. The most exciting to me is what Apple calls live voicemail. Back when the original iPhone launched, Apple's virtual voicemail changed the game, and I think that this may do it again. So if a caller calls you, you ignore the call, and they choose to leave a voicemail, you will see a real-time transcription of their message on your screen. And if it's important, well, you can pick up the phone mid-voicemail and take over. I didn't even know that this was possible, to interrupt a phone call mid-voicemail, since mailboxes, to my knowledge, have always been controlled by the carrier. And well, maybe this isn't possible, really, or wasn't previously, because a footnote on Apple's website says, quote, available in English, Canada, US, end quote. Even in 2023, not every iPhone carrier globally supports visual voicemail, a feature that's 15 years old. So if this is implemented at a carrier level, which I suspect it might be, good luck to the rest of the world on getting this feature. But hopefully it isn't and can roll out globally very soon. At least as an American in the US, I'm excited to get it later this year. Speaking of voicemail, you can now leave a video message when calling with FaceTime. Now, on the surface, this seems kind of dumb, since you could just send a text or a video message directly. But I actually like it, because when I video call someone, at least, I actually want to demonstrate them something. I'm not just calling via video for fun. And so being able to do that without having to go open another app like Snapchat or wait for them to call me back, I actually think is pretty handy. Now, Apple spent a lot of time talking about contact posters. When you receive a call or on a call, you will see your friend displayed with their name, their image, and a little colorful, cutesy background, kind of like iOS 16 lock screens. And I think this is a clear succession to the idea that people love customizing their iPhone screens. And Apple is playing into that more and more with every successive update, which I think is great. With that said, iOS already knows the names of my closest contacts within my Photos app and has photos of them. It would have been nice if there was an AI-style feature that would have been created or included that would auto-create or auto-generate a bunch of cards for lazy people like me who will probably only do this for myself and maybe my wife's contact cards, and really nobody else. Now, I will admit that when Apple started talking about the phone, my hopes and dreams swelled for contact search using the T9 phone keypad. This has been an indispensable Android feature forever, but Apple failed me again. Maybe in 2034 when they update the phone app again next. Continuing on with quality of life improvements, Messages got another big update for the second year in a row. Maybe even bigger than last year's update because you can finally search with filters. Presumably, now you can successfully find a message from months or years ago, a feat that was previously impossible because search sucked. You can set filters for keywords, for contact names, and more. Now, the details on this are scant. We'll have to try the betas out soon to see how granular you can get with this. Now, while I'm doubtful that it's a thing, it sure would be great if they were using natural language processing for partial or conditional word matching like some fancy pants apps out there do, because what weirdo remembers the exact word or phrase they sent Becky 12 months ago? At least we're throwing a dart into a haystack rather than a dart off of the face of the earth, because finding stuff was impossible previous to now. Messages also get some other stuff, like apps. Well, they're pushed out of the way, which is nice because I've always felt them to be very cluttered. I don't use them that often, and so now they're gone unless you request them. You can now swipe to reply, which helps busy group message threads, as does the ability to jump to wherever you last read. Audio messages now offer transcriptions inline. Thank you. And with the new check-in feature, you can alert a friend or family member when you reach your intended destination. And if for whatever reason you stop making progress, your phone will check in with you. And if you don't respond, then it will then share your location, your battery, and cellular strength with your friends so that they can decide to call you or the police. Neat. A redesigned stickers app is fun if you care about stickers, but I do not. So let's talk about AirDrop. AirDrop has long been one of the Apple ecosystem's best features, and it gets amazing updates this year for the first time in a long time. No longer must you ensure a recipient's discovery preferences are set to be discovered correctly, and then wait for their name to appear. You can now simply just bring the two devices close together. iPhone, iPad, Apple Watch, doesn't matter, they all work, and ta-da! You can AirDrop anything that you were previously able to, and you can now, and this is fantastic, even step outside of AirDrop range, and the transfer will continue to work over the internet rather than working strictly ad hoc. That is super cool. Additionally, using a new feature called Name Drop, you can now share contact cards with one another, complete with that same fancy pants face card that you set up for yourself a while ago. So long business cards and awkwardly figuring out how to spell strangers' names that you just met and are putting into your phone. Now, redesigned home screen widgets came in iOS 14, but they always kinda sucked because they weren't interactive. You tap a widget and it would open up the whole app. No longer. WidgetKit now allows developers to add interactions right from the home screen. As someone who was never really a widget-heavy user, primarily due to this lacking interaction, I think this will absolutely get me to move my home screen around and redesign stuff, because frankly, I'm really excited to give them a shot. Having widgets actually work as widgets is gonna be great. It should have been this way 3 years ago, but I'm glad it's finally here. And yes, I know Android users, this has been a thing for like 15 years. The least sexy but perhaps most interesting part of iOS is a new autocorrect prediction engine that now actually learns the way you type, in addition to, well, phrases that you use to improve autocorrect and prediction suggestions, even if that means profanity. This is great because iOS autocorrect seemed to stop getting better like a decade ago and has become increasingly frustrating in the recent years. Hopefully the fix the doctor ordered does the trick. Now, the last big feature that was headlined is what Apple calls Standby, which turns your iPhone into a useful gadget when charging and in landscape mode. Get ready to buy new accessories! Not only does it display clock info, but it also integrates widget stacks, it permits HomeKit control, and it utilizes Siri to display on-screen info if you've prompted it to perform an action with your voice, off-screen. I can't help but think that this is an exercise in development for what is sure to be the long-rumored HomePod with a display. Maybe that's something we'll see later this year. As someone deep into the HomeKit ecosystem, I sure hope so. And that brings me to my biggest disappointment for iOS 17. The Home app didn't get any update. The update last year, it sucked, and anyone who actually uses HomeKit knows that. If you think the Home app is good, it's because you're not actually using it. The app is still awful, Matter integration has thus far been sloppy, and Siri is as garbage as it's ever been for home automation. I'm mad, this needed a fix, and it didn't get one. At least when you put your iPhone in a different spot on its little vertical charger in each room, it remembers the widgets that you were using in that point in time. I'm being sarcastic, but that actually is kind of cool. You put it on your nightstand, it shows you clock. You put it in your kitchen, it shows you your recipe book. I like it. Maybe I should redirect some of that frustration and anger concerning HomeKit to the all-new Journal app coming later this year. This app will use on-device machine learning to create personalized suggestions and prompts based on what you did that day to force you to be introspective. This is actually great. Journaling is a really healthy habit, and it is sure to Sherlock Day One, an app that is beloved by many, but in my opinion, has gotten a little bit money hungry in the past. This is going to be included on iOS for free. A few other small updates that I think are pretty neat are the inclusion of recognition for your pets by name inside of the Photos album, or inside of the Photos app in your Photos album. And you can now share Find My items. Also pretty cool. Oh, and now you can just say Siri instead of, which is sure to trigger even more false prompts when you watch YouTube videos. You're welcome. iPadOS, a platform that lags behind the iPhone on feature set every single year, which has become increasingly frustrating for users of the platform that are told every single year by Apple that the iPad is a computer replacement. Well, this year, I guess we do get a little bit of a bone because iPadOS does finally gain feature parity with iOS for the first time in years. That is thanks to the addition of lock screen customization and widgets, which we missed out on last year. And then we get all the other new features, message updates, journaling, the health app, which is now coming for the first time ever, but we still don't get a calculator. Maybe next year. Now, Apple is sneaky. They always add features to the iOS section of the keynote. Features also available on the iPhone, but they don't say that because they want the iPad segment to seem like Apple actually cares about the iPad. This year, it was interactive home screen widgets, which we've already mentioned is coming to the iPhone, but also improvements to PDFs. Now using machine learning, iOS, iPadOS, and macOS can identify PDF fields and autofill them, even from scanned documents, which I think is really cool. And then you can act on it and send that completed file to another app directly. This is awesome, and I hope that every paid PDF app that did a really crappy job of basically this same thing that charged $50 a year, I hope they disappear and the developers trip on a shoelace. Now, PDFs also got much tighter integration inside of Apple Notes with collaboration functionality and Apple Pencil markup support. This probably isn't going to be a replacement for students that are using Notability or GoodNotes, but I am glad to see that Apple's own Notes app is getting more powerful year by year, especially for occasional PDF schmucks like myself. Perhaps most importantly for the iPad, Stage Manager, which has been garbage on iPadOS since it launched last year, now gets more flexibility in moving and resizing windows. You can even overlap them, which might not fix the multitasking feature's woes, but it certainly addresses a previously frustrating concern of every iPad Power user. I'm excited to try it out. New features for AirPods were not on my bingo card for WWDC 2023, but I am super excited about them. In addition to small features coming to most of the AirPods, like quicker device switching and the ability to mute and unmute phone calls by tapping the stem or pressing them, there is a new adaptive audio feature specifically and only for AirPods Pro 2. Sorry, AirPods Max users, you only paid $600. What do you expect? This is a feature that, if it delivers on its promises, will blend transparency and noise canceling modes to dynamically switch between one or the other based on the activity that you're doing. So, you'll be able to hear alerts and sounds deemed important, like car horns, but not, say, for example, the drone of traffic. Additionally, as soon as you start speaking to someone nearby, someone in front of you, your media volume in your headphones will lower. The voices that are directionally in front of you will be enhanced, but all the other noises around you will be reduced. This is the kind of thing that Apple seems like they'd be really bad at, so I'm skeptical. But if it does as it promises, this will make AirPods even better than they already are. I'm excited to try it out, and I'm really shocked, frankly, that it's not coming to a next generation of AirPods. But don't get me wrong, I'm grateful. Thank you, Apple. You should have brought us more than just the AirPods 2. Pro 2. Like the AirPods Max. AirPods Max. What a waste of money. But perhaps the biggest software update today was to watchOS 10, which receives its first major UX refresh in years. Stock apps are now said to make a much better usage of the space provided them. And in some instances, this does seem legit. Like the weather app they demoed, that taps into the corners of your screen to place buttons and widgets there. That's nice. On the other hand, a lot of apps like the Activity app seem to make things less information dense. Now, rather than scrolling to a list that shows you your ring progress simultaneously on the display all at once for move, exercise, and stand, you now need to use the crown to scroll one card at a time. Now, there's more data in these cards than there was previously, but I often find that I don't want all of that data. I just want an overview, and I am a little bit worried that this adds too many steps and cardifies the US a little bit too much. It looks very crown dependent, and I guess we'll have to see how it goes, but I'm a little skeptical. On the flip side, the side button now jumps into Control Center rather than to the multitasking view, which I am in favor of. I've always thought multitasking on the watch kind of stinks, and really, it seems that watchOS 10 has completely rethought it. It now makes sense to use those pretty clean watch faces that Apple's been including for years without losing all of the information that you otherwise would have, because now you can just scroll on the crown from your watch screen, from your watch face, to display a smart stack of information that you would have otherwise missed out on from absent complications. That is great and may encourage me, for the first time ever, to try a watch face other than Infograph Modular, which to this date has been the only good watch face that Apple has ever put on the Apple Watch. There's also updates to cycling and hiking by using Bluetooth accessories and topographic maps respectively. It's handy, but I will also assume that enthusiasts continue to use the likes of Strava and Gaia GPS instead. Frankly, I'm a little bit disappointed that we didn't get a redesigned app interface. The app cloud has always been pretty crappy, and the list mode isn't much better for heavy app watch users. That is to say, watch users that have a lot of apps. The redesign does look nice, but I do think that relative to the other OSs we saw today, it needs quite a bit of tweaking and attention before the public release this fall. Hopefully that happens, and/or I'm just off the mark. I'm not much of an Apple Watch guy anyways. Now we get to the Mac, and holy smokes. Before we talk about macOS, let's talk about two of the three computers that we got today. The updated Mac Studio and the 15-inch MacBook Air. They are exactly what you would expect them to be. The Mac Studio ditches an M1 Max and Ultra for an M2 Max and Ultra with an average improvement of 20% across the board. Not earth-shattering, but I'm glad to see that it has been updated year on year. For basically the last 6 months, we heard like, oh, it's not going to get updated, or it was a one-time thing, or it's going to be replaced by the Mac Pro, or it'll get an update every other year. It seems like they're doing an update every single year, and that is great. Now, the MacBook Air, that's a little bit more interesting. Not because of the hardware, that's actually not interesting at all. It's got the same M2, the same form factor, the same display brightness, the same color accuracy, the same configurable options, the same thickness, the same camera, the same microphones, the same I/O. It's pretty much the same as the 13-inch. The only differences are an increase in weight from 2.7 to 3.3 pounds, 6 speakers instead of 4. Hopefully, this model sounds better than the 13-inch Air, which I actually thought sounded pretty mediocre. And, oh, yeah, duh, a 15.3-inch screen. Now, this machine has been rumored for well over a year, and it had also been rumored at around $1,500 to $1,600. At that rumored price point, I would have been very bummed out because it would have made this machine purely a business play. Because for consumers, it would make sense to spend a little tiny bit more money on a much more fast, much more capable, much better looking screened 14.2-inch MacBook Pro. That frankly, businesses that want to give their employees bigger screens but without spending an extra penny on anything else, that they would be the only real customers of this machine. But Apple kind of surprised me. They dropped the price of the 13-inch M2 Air by $100 to $1,099, and they introduced the 15-inch Air at $1,299. This is a much better price, and unlike the 13-inch M2 Air, that when it launched, felt kind of lost. I talked about this in my review, that it just didn't really seem like a viable or significantly better replacement than the M1, and that the price was wrong. This machine, the 15-inch, has nailed it. It has a target market, and that is casual users who want a big screen in a light laptop. Oh, and a bunch of business customers. And I'm more than confident that this machine will be great. I have got one on order, so get subscribed for our review coming soon. Now let's talk about macOS Sonoma. First, it inherits most all of the new features from iOS and iPadOS, but it does add important flagship pro features that only a Mac can handle, like new screensavers. Now, I install Arial on all of my Macs, so I forget that the Apple TV screensavers are not a thing on the Mac out of the box. But they kind of are now, with new slow-mo Arial footage that slows into place, becoming the desktop wallpaper when you log in. It's dumb, but it's also kind of fun. We also now get widgets on the desktop, pro features. You can now drag widgets outside of the hellscape that is Notification Center onto the desktop. Or even cooler, you can use continuity from your iPhone to drag them from your iPhone to your Mac without installing the corresponding app on your Mac. And then, yeah, you just plop them onto your desktop. Now, they're only active when you're inside of the Finder, and switching to another app fades them out for what Apple says provides better focus. But I'm weird, and I'm really adamant, I guess you would say, about having a very tidy, non-distracting desktop. So I don't really know if I'm going to be a huge fan of this, but I'm willing to give it a shot. A bunch of really cool camera features come to macOS and iPadOS when sharing your screen, thanks to new camera video effects. So these will work in Zoom, Teams, basically any webcam-based software. Additionally, you can now place augmented reality iMessage-style reactions during meetings, which, while absurd, is kind of fun. They can even be triggered via gesture, so you put your thumbs up and it turns to fireworks. Oh, Apple. Safari, perhaps surprisingly, also gets some pretty big updates this year, with profile switching, so you can keep your extensions, your history, and your bookmarks different from profile to profile. One for work, one for school, one for personal. Look, I think they could have tied this into focus modes instead, but whatever. More exciting to me is, oh yeah, there's also like an improved private browsing mode, which is cool. But more exciting to me is that you can now create native looking apps from websites that live inside your dock. So they'll show up in Command Tab, they show up in your applications folder. They are, by all intents and purposes, native Mac apps, but they're not, they're just a web view. Now, there have been a lot of third-party apps that have done this in the past, but they all suck. So I am really excited to see Apple try it first party. This is awesome. It could be awesome. And the primary reason that I'm using the Arc web browser is because I wanted something similar to this feature. So this may actually get me to switch back to Safari, which I will admit I do miss the speed of frequently. Then they spent several minutes talking about gaming, which is hilarious and also dumb. And I will discuss this at length in a future video. But yeah, Kojima-san came out on video to talk about getting, the Mac to run an exclusive cut of 2019's Death Stranding. Great, that game is old. No Man's Sky was not talked about in the keynote, but it also released today. Good. It's old. Now, look, I don't want to sound negative because any games on the Mac are good, but we've done this year after year after year and it doesn't get better. But I'm going to talk about this later in a future video. A few exciting updates were not announced in the keynote that I found later on Apple.com, like screen sharing now supporting high-resolution display streaming. This has been a thing that has been absent since, well, forever, and it should have been a thing like 15 years ago, but I'm glad that it's here now. There's also the ability to use dictation and typing simultaneously without having to stop dictating. And there's also a cool new lockdown mode. So unfortunately, what I think needed the most attention in macOS, Notification Center, which is garbage, did not see a redesign. Also, the new crappy System Settings app, which launched last year, was changed up until the very last day that Ventura came out. And then Ventura came out and people were like, yeah, this is still bad, but maybe it'll get better. And then Apple did nothing for a year. Yeah, well, it seems like they're not going to do anything again. It's not done. It sucks. The general polish of macOS seems this year to be the most patinaed of all of Apple's platforms. And that's been the trend for years now. It's confusing. Which I guess leads into our next topic, something that confusingly hit everyone right in the nuts, unless you're me, the Mac Pro. Now, I would just like to gloat for a mere second because everyone for the last year has been talking about how the new Mac Pro would be a redesigned form factor and that there would be no expansion capabilities. And if there was, it would only be with special Apple accelerator cards. And I called BS because the 2019 Mac Pro form factor took them so much money to make. And because the only remaining pros that are unsatisfied by the Mac Studio were 3D graphics artists and musicians that needed that PCIe expansion, that I thought everyone else was wrong. And guess what? We got a cheese grater with PCIe. I'm right, yeah. I ordered one because what do you think I am? A smart person? Yeah, but no, realistically, this computer has transcended practicality for almost everyone and only serves an extremely niche market. Not even one that covers all of the pro markets that the 2019 Mac Pro did. And here's why. So it's got the same exact M2 Ultra SoC that is present in the $3,000 less expensive Mac Studio. Apple talks about how this is the fastest chip ever in a Mac Pro and how its onboard media engine has 7 times the performance of the Afterburner FPGA that shipped with the previous generation Mac Pro. And that's true, but so does the Mac Studio. There is nothing special about this from a compute standpoint. It is exactly the same performance. So then, where does it differ? I/O. And that's it, literally only I/O. Mac Pro has got 8 Thunderbolt 4 ports versus the Studio's 6. We also get 3 USB-A ports on the new Mac Pro over 2 USB-A ports from the prior generation. Whoopee. Add another high bandwidth HDMI, a second 10 gigabit Ethernet NIC, and take away the SD card reader. There you go. That's your factory I/O on the Mac Pro. Yeah, so those changes aren't huge. Let's talk PCIe then, because that theoretically is. There are 7 slots available on the new Mac Pro, but not really, because the factory I/O card, like the prior generation, takes up 1 slot. So that leaves 6 practical expansion slots versus the Intel Mac Pro's 7. However, the new Mac Pro slots, they are PCIe Gen 4, which the previous generation Mac Pro was not. So that's good, I guess. But unfortunately, we also lose Apple's cool MPX slots that offered cableless power delivery to Apple's special GPUs. And that's because, well, there is no graphics expandability here. Like I said, there is nothing, nada, zero, that is special about this machine from a compute standpoint. So if you can't put graphics cards in there, what do you do with this? And who is it for? Well, there's a few markets. For example, DAWs like Avid, Pro Tools, and Ableton Live, they are used for professional audio production all the time. And those applications will often use DSPs and audio stream hardware accelerator cards that have historically only worked over PCIe. There are also networking applications that can utilize the power of fiber HBAs and multi-gigabit networking cards. There are some storage arrays that can take advantage of hardware RAID cards that are also compatible with macOS and subsequently, I guess, the new Mac Pro. But here's the thing. As Apple has continually neglected its Pro market, many of these Pro apps have just migrated to supporting Apple Silicon already by way of Thunderbolt expansion. Instead of Avid's PCIe HDX card, many musicians instead use Antelope's Thunderbolt HDX, DSP, and FPGAs. Rather than using a QSFP PCIe NIC, networking engineers will just get one that's Thunderbolt capable. What previously would have been done with a hardware RAID is now outdated. Everyone's moved to better alternatives like ZFS. So, look, we'll go more into detail with our teardown and review once mine arrives. But a lot of people assume that the new Mac Pro is aimless, that Apple just released it because. That's not true. It knows what it wants to be, but it doesn't seem to be aware that most of the industries it's targeting, the industries that would have welcomed it, they've already moved on a couple years ago. So I guess then, where does it go from here? No, we'll talk about that next week when mine arrives, but where you're supposed to go now is to my next video covering the Apple event and, subsequently, the Apple Vision Pro headset. As a VR enthusiast, boy do I have thoughts. Thank you so much for watching, see you there, and as always, stay snazzy.